What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another month wrap-up video, and we've got 8 movies from the month of April that I'm going to be talking about today and ranking from worst to best. The only film this month that I really wanted to check out that I didn't get a chance to was Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. 3 different times I bought tickets for that movie. Something came up, so I will check it out eventually when it comes to VOD, but unfortunately just didn't get a chance to throw it into my schedule to be able to make this video. But still got a very wide variety of movies and a wide variety of things to talk about. Also, I'll go ahead and apologize to anybody that comes in that just wants to hear about movies, because I have 2 movies on this list that just caused a whole bunch of bullshit that, unfortunately, I feel like I got to address today. And we're going to waste no time whatsoever getting into it, because my number 8, the movie that I have enjoyed the least in the month of April, is going to be Nefarious. And this is probably a movie that a lot of you watching have not heard of. This was not advertised very heavily. It did not blow up the box office, so there wasn't a whole lot of post-release talk. And the discussion that it unfortunately did create for those of us that have been a part of it is kind of problematic and disheartening, so I want to discuss that just a little bit here. Now, I will be talking very extensively about the actual plot of Nefarious, so if this is a movie that you are curious to check out, please just skip to number 7 and go form your own opinion on the movie. Don't let me spoil full-on plot details for you. So Nefarious, I walked into absolutely blind. All I knew about it was that it was some form of religious, like demonic possession thriller, and you had Sean Patrick Flanery on the poster, and I like him a lot, so that was enough to draw me in. And I typically go into a lot of horror movies nowadays blind, or as blind as I can, because marketing tends to give away a lot of the best parts of the movie, give away a little bit too much. But with this movie, it wouldn't have mattered if I watched the trailer, because it wasn't marketed 100% honestly as is. And what this turned out to actually be is a faith-based horror thriller that is essentially getting a demon and an atheist into a room to have discussions on their political and religious ideologies. And so the movie is essentially just kind of hitting bullet points of the thoughts, the ideologies of the writers and directors, and kind of spewing them out to you. And when I found out that this was created by the creators of God's Not Dead and Unplanned, the movie made a lot more sense, because that's exactly what those movies are. Now, I haven't seen Unplanned, I know enough about it, but I have seen God's Not Dead. It's honestly one of the worst films I've ever seen in my life, and has nothing to do with the message of the film or the Christian religion as a whole, even though that's where some people tend to go with that statement. It's just a genuinely terrible movie. And every single person that I have ever talked to that is in fact a Christian that has seen that movie has said the exact same thing. So it's not held in very high regard. And so they chose to market this movie without utilizing any of that, like from the creators of God's Not Dead or Unplanned. There's no hints whatsoever towards a lot of the political and the religious message or agenda of the film in the marketing. And they did that for 3 reasons. Number 1, obviously, box office. God's Not Dead, Unplanned. These are not prestigious movies. These are not movies that are well liked among the movie community, whether you're Christian or not. And so putting that up there is not a very good advertisement for your film. Number 2 is also because they know that if you're very honest about the marketing, in the same way that some of the movies that have very left agendas have been, they hide that because they know if it's in the marketing, there's going to be people turned off by it and they're not going to go check it out. And the third reason is kind of the dishonest part of it that's a little more frustrating, which is, you know, the people that are trying to get this message across, they want you to be sidelined by it. They want you to be blindsided by it. They want you to sit down for a movie and not realize that's what you're going to hear, because in their mind, they want to enlighten you. They want to bring you over to the cause, I guess. And so all 3 of those reasons, this is a movie that's advertised as something that it's not exactly. And, you know, I walked out of the movie. I thought Sean Patrick Flanery was pretty good in it, and he's the only reason I wanted to see it, so that's good. I thought the setup of the movie was interesting, getting 2 people, 2 very different ideologies into a room and just have them discuss that and have some crazy things happen in the background. And, you know, some of the best movies ever made are just people talking. You can do a really good version of that. I just didn't think this movie was. But it just turned into a really boring experience, because you have the main character, who I didn't think was very likable at all, who's kind of representing the atheists and the leftists and the woke crowd, I guess. And then you have Sean Patrick Flanery's character, who's a demon that's just, despite his huge talents of an actor, I felt was a little bit one note. And, you know, some of the ticks that he was bringing in is things that we've seen before. in things like Primal Fear and in Split. And so there wasn't really anything that felt genuinely new or interesting about his take on dual personalities and that side of his performance. So it just ended up being a movie that didn't tell a story that was interesting to me, didn't really tell its story all that well in a way that would keep a viewer, whether the viewer agrees with the movie's points or not, engaged. And so all that you're really left with is a movie that turned into essentially what I called a 90-minute sermon that's just giving the writers and directors thoughts on religion and some political things, and you're just sitting there listening to it. And I don't enjoy that experience no matter what side it comes from. There's been movies that have been very left-wing agenda, very quote-unquote woke agenda, that if that takes over the characters and the storyline, I am exactly the same amount of frustrated with that side. Yeah, the last year's Men, that was talking about toxic masculinity, that I thought was just a ridiculous movie. Very talented filmmaker, but very ridiculous movie. You had Texas Chainsaw Massacre from last year that inserted this whole woke crowd, anti-gun message thing. And I'm like, just get that the fuck out of here. Like, that's just so shoehorned in for the sake of it. And the way that you're executing it is ridiculous. It's not going to achieve anything that you want it to. Go back a couple more years. Black Christmas 2019. That thing might as well be Woke Agenda, the movie. And I fucking despised it. Easily one of the most hated movies that I've ever seen in my career as a critic or a YouTuber. So I'm fair. You can't say anything else. I'm fair on both sides. I don't want either side sitting down and preaching to me for 90 minutes. Tell me a story. Give me some characters. That's what I go to the movie for. And that was not what this movie was. Essentially, the plot of the movie, you got a guy who's a serial killer, and he's on death row, and he's going to be executed that night, provided that the psychologist, which is the lead of the movie, comes in and talks with him and gives him the sign off that he is not mentally unfit to be executed. And so that's the setup. It's two dudes just sitting in a room talking. And Sean Patrick Flannery's character, the serial killer, claims that he is possessed by a demon. And so part of the plot initially is just trying to get the doctor to believe that he is actually possessed. And then quickly the movie turns into kind of a sermon, is the way that I described it, to where Sean Patrick Flannery's character tells him, you're going to kill 3 people before you leave today. To which he responds like any normal, rational person. Like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to kill anybody. And so they start getting into discussions about demons and God and the way that the human race has been kind of manipulated by demons and Satan to do their bidding and to have this ideological war against God, turning his creation against him and all of that stuff. And he starts to talk about euthanasia first. Starts to talk to the main character, about his mother and like, why did you help your mother kill herself? And why did you do this? And so they spend like a little commercial break in the movie talking about just that moral question of euthanasia. And at the end of it, he's like, okay, well, I mean, you helped kill your mother, so there's one of the 3. And then they get into an abortion debate to where the demonic character is talking to the main character, who is an atheist, by the way, and relating back to biblical times and scripture about the sacrifice of children, and relates that to modern day abortion, and tells him, your ex-girlfriend right now, unbeknownst to you, is actually pregnant. And she's in a clinic right now getting ready to kill your baby. So what are you going to do? And so they sit there and they go back and forth. And it's very much a scripted right-wing versus left-wing character kind of dialogue there, where he's like, it's her choice. I'm not really ready. I don't know anything about it. And it's not really a baby. And it's things that you would expect, like textbook, to be written. And so then whenever he makes a phone call, finds out that the demon was correct, that his ex-girlfriend just went through with an abortion, and he was just that much too late to stop her. Then he's like, oh, that's 2. That's 2 of the 3. And then he continues to kind of mentally fuck with the dude and battle ideologies with him to a point where it comes to a physical altercation where the demon grabs a hold of him and stuff. And so then the main character is pissed off enough to where he's like, fuck it, and just signs his approval for the guy to be executed, knowing either he's a demon possessing an innocent guy as like a vessel, or he is completely mentally unfit. And out of anger, he just says, fuck it, he's going to die. And so then they kind of get into the whole death penalty debate there for a short little sneeze. And he's like, oh, that's three people. See, I told you. And so essentially that's the plot of the movie. That's the whole entire experience, is that you have a very Christian and even conservative to a degree debate on one side, and a very atheist and left-wing debate on the other side. And I have no interest in a movie like that. And I have no interest in seeing a movie, whether it's left-wing or right-wing, that is that type of storytelling, where it's just like, here's our ideologies for 90 minutes. Thanks for paying. See you later. So I give my honest review, saying a variation of what I just said, that as a movie, it doesn't work all that well. And as a sermon, it's not something that I enjoy or that I really signed up for. And they knew that because they hid the fact that's what the movie was. And I'll be damned if every single day since I released that review, dozens and dozens of Christians and conservatives just pouring into the comments, just trying to completely dismiss me or anybody that disliked the movie and point out all of like my character flaws as if they know me at all, like calling me a demon, calling me a leftist and a wokeist, and saying that I must support the grooming of young children. And, oh, what do you expect? This guy's got a Chucky shirt, whatever the fuck that means. I mean, it was just like they were coming off an assembly line. There was like 6 variations of comments that were just coming in daily from different people. And one of the big defenses, too, which I'll get into, is just like, oh, isn't it funny how 95% on the audience score and was it 31% on Rotten Tomatoes? That tells you everything you need to know. Yeah, it does, but it doesn't tell me what you think it tells me. When did we get to a point to where your religion, your political stance, and where you are in the spectrum of social consciousness or the culture wars of today, where did we get to a point to where those 3 have to be intertwined? And if you don't have all 3, you're not a part of the club. Like, there's a very loud group of people that are Christians, conservatives, extreme conservatives, important detail, and extremely anti-woke. And if you're not a part of one of those 3, then you must be the extreme opposite. If you don't agree with all 3 and you're not like it way on this side, there's no middle. There's no middle. You've got to be the other side. That to me is like the most idiotic form of thinking that has plagued so many people nowadays. If you're not left, you're right. If you're not woke, you're anti-woke. And it's just like, guys, there is a very large gray area. And I'm not talking religion, so don't debate me with there's no gray area with God, because I didn't say that. I'm talking specifically politically and the social side of things. There is a large gray area that most of us with common sense live. Most people that have the ability to think for themselves live. If you know where you're going to stand on an argument before it's even presented because you're just a part of this team or that team, to me, that's fucking idiotic. That's moronic. That shows that you do not think for yourself whatsoever. You just want to be a part of the team. I listen to this side, I listen to this side, and I decide for myself what makes the most sense for me. And I have some things that lean left with the way that I think. I have some things that lean right with the way that I think. And so strictly on the political side of things, it was absolutely hilarious to me how many people in the comment sections and even a couple of TikTokers ran away with my Rotten Tomatoes blurb, calling me a leftist and assuming I'm on the left. Nope. Sorry. Try again. And the other side of that was absolutely hilarious and entertaining to me is this whole like defense of, well, now you see what it's like for all of us every time we see a leftist agenda in a movie, and now this is our turn to do it. Textbook definition of hypocrisy to me. If you're so put off and disgusted and mad about this side doing something, and your response is just to do the exact same thing, moronic, idiotic, hypocritical. Not a solution whatsoever. That's the kind of stuff that convinces me that you're really not all that passionate about what's actually being argued. You're just passionate about the actual argument. You're just passionate about fighting somebody about something. Now getting into the religious side of things, and I'm not going to dwell on this for very long, but just for the sake of bringing it up, because fuck it, it's my channel and I can say what I want. I've actually struggled with Christian faith my entire life. Going all the way back to a small child where I had some very, very bad experiences at a Christian private school. And all throughout my life, all the way into my adulthood, I have went to churches, different churches. I've talked with people. I've sat down. I've read the Bible. And I am somebody that genuinely has struggled with that faith. I've tried. I've pulled back. I've gone back. And who knows? Maybe I'll struggle with it my entire life. Maybe one day I'll have a moment of awakening. Or maybe one day I'll never attempt to be part of that again. I really don't know. But the thing that's disheartening is so many people, either on TikTok or in the YouTube comment section or whatever, that are representing Christianity in a form of like ridiculing people and looking down at people and assuming the worst of people and celebrating that, you know, they're not part of the cool kids table. They're not a part of the cool club. It's the weirdest form of religious expression that I've seen. And I'm here to tell you, I have a lot of family, and most of my greatest and closest friends are very devout Christians. And people that act that way, that walk into the video and they're like, oh, this guy clearly needs God. LOL, laugh emoji. Or, oh, this is a demon. He's exactly like Nefarious. If you're leaving comments like that, you're not a Christian. You're an asshole with the Bible. Because I'm here to tell you, people that actually do follow the Christian God and people that actually do care about all of their fellow man, which is pretty integral to Christianity, they don't respond that way to people that are not a part of their faith or have struggled with that faith. They are always welcoming. And they're always like, hey, I'm just a phone call away. I'm just one knock at the door if you ever want to talk about it. And that's something that I'm so grateful to people that are in my life that are really devout Christians. They have never, ever once looked down on me or pressured me or got disgusted with me or anything like that. They are always there the same way after we've had 100 conversations that they were on our first conversation. So for the hundreds of people at this point that saw that review and have looked down on me as if I'm some kind of a visual representation of Satan, you probably need God a hell of a lot more than I do. In conclusion, let's talk about this critic score versus audience score thing. So yeah, 95%, whatever it has for audience scores, and it's in the 30s as far as critic scores, of which there was like 13 reviews the last time that I looked, and hundreds in the audience scores. I'm sure there's no review bombing going on. I'm sure all you guys that are flooding into my comment section because I'm probably in some subreddit somewhere under Christian Conservative America, I'm sure you guys aren't just flooding a bunch of 10 out of 10 reviews as if this is the greatest movie ever created on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm sure that's not happening. Remember what I said earlier about hypocrisy? Every single time that there's, The Last of Us has an episode that comes out and gets highly rated that happens to have a gay couple at the center of it, and they accuse everybody on the left and everybody woke of review bombing it, so they swoop in and put a bunch of 0 out of 10s trying to counterbalance that, and we've seen it happen so many times, and they're going to do the same thing with this one. 10 out of 10, greatest thing ever made. 95%. What does that tell you? What does it tell me? Tells me you guys are full of shit, and you and the people that you hate are way more similar than you will ever admit. Coming in at number 7 is going to be The Pope's Exorcist, and this was fine. For somebody that does not like a lot of exorcism movies, because I just feel like it's very redundant. There's just the same bag of tricks with all of them ever since the original Exorcist, and none of them have been able to do it as good as The Exorcist. And even saying that, I'm not even the biggest fan of the original Exorcist. I actually prefer the third one, but that's barely an exorcism movie. This one, I walked in with very low expectations. Russell Crowe was really the only draw here, where it's like, okay, one of the best actors who have ever lived doing this, maybe there's some merit to it. Maybe they'll have a few surprises along the way. And I was surprised at how much fun the movie had with its concept. It's very lighthearted. It's very much a self-aware film, and it's very tonally different from other exorcism movies that you've seen, because typically, like I said, they're all very samey. And this one has elements of that, but there's also just a lot more fun to be had here. So I actually halfway enjoyed this one. It's not a movie I would recommend to too many people. It's not a movie that I probably would ever revisit. Now they're talking about a sequel. If I didn't have this channel, I don't know if I would watch the sequel. But nonetheless, I did not hate my time with the film. Now, it is bogged down, unfortunately, eventually by doing a lot of those sameness things and kind of falling into tropes and cliches. And so it doesn't really do much to rise above the pack of dozens of exorcism films that haven't done much for me. But because of Russell Crowe's performance and his character and, you know, some of the interesting, unique aspects to it, I would be lying if I didn't tell you that I had a halfway good time with it. Moving on to number 6, and this is going to be Ari Aster's latest film, Beau Is Afraid, the other clusterfuck of drama that I went through in the month of April. And this was all on Twitter. Eventually, I just need to delete Twitter. Twitter is just not a good thing. So basically, to catch you up on my thoughts on Ari Aster thus far, I really enjoy Hereditary. I think it's a very good horror film, one of the better modern ones for sure. I wasn't a part of the crowd that just adored it and was ready to get a Hereditary tattoo, but I really liked that movie. Midsummer, not so much. Wasn't a big fan of that one for many reasons. The review's still up. You can check that out. Just no, wasn't a movie for me whatsoever. And I have never seen the full trailer for Beau Is Afraid, but I've seen enough of it and I've seen enough of the marketing to know that this was going to be a really strange movie. And so I walked into this one because Ari Aster, despite not liking Midsummer so much, is a level of quality director that he's earned my giving him a chance. And so I walk in to check this thing out, knowing that the chances of it being probably not my type of film are pretty high. And this is a 3-hour metaphoric fever dream type deal where the main character, played by Joaquin Phoenix, is afraid of just about everything, hence the title, and very neurotic and anxiety driven. And essentially it's like an odyssey where he's trying to get home to his mother. And very quickly it's introduced that she's been killed. And so he's trying to get home for her funeral, and just he keeps meeting these people and entering these situations throughout the way. It's unique. It's very well directed. Visually, it's really creative. There's a lot of really good things about it. There's a lot of merit to be had with this, and I can appreciate and acknowledge all of that. But it is not a movie for me whatsoever. And it is a movie that really goes for this very specific style of humor that didn't work for me personally, and I'm just a hard audience with humor. I've said that numerous times. It is overly long. Overly long. Like, look, I'm already kind of exhausted with 3-hour movies as it is, because that's becoming more and more prevalent over the past couple of years. And it's because so many movies don't really feel like they earn the 3-hour rating. Like the Batman from last year, I could have watched a 4-hour version of that. And I'm sure there's people that watch this that could have watched a 5-hour version of Beau Is Afraid. But to me, this is a movie that had enough juice in it to really hold my own attention personally and really give me a valuable experience that could not have been longer than 2 hours. If they had made a 2-hour version of this movie, I probably would have walked away at least giving you a positive review and saying, hey, it's not necessarily my type of thing, but I dug it for these reasons. But it's just way overly long, and it just kind of keeps hitting the same point over and over and over again. And so if you're a big Ari Aster fan, I would recommend you check it out, give it a shot. If you look at the trailers and that kind of really weird, offbeat kind of humor, dark humor type movie is your cup of tea, then check it out. But it just wasn't for me. And so I came out of the movie and I said, you know, it was a grueling 3-hour experience, which it was. It was 3 hours that felt like 5. And I don't know if I'm going to watch another Ari Aster film in the future, because 2 out of 3 films have just really not been my thing. And so I'm at a point to where if it's a very educated guess on my part that it's not going to be my type of thing, sometimes I might just not give it a shot, because I value my time, and to have to sit through that experience is one thing, but then come home and do 2 to 3 hours of work on top of it is not the most appealing thing in the world. So I always try to give movies a shot, but if it's becoming a pattern, it's becoming a telltale sign that Ari Aster is not on my wavelength, then there's not really any reason for me to continue to try to attempt to be on that wavelength. And man, did people get mad about that. And the weird thing about it is you got like this weird duality to where you have some people that's just like, of course it wasn't your thing. You just like nothing but Marvel movies, which is fucking hilarious. And then you have the same people that are like, why'd you bother? This isn't your type of thing. You don't like smart movies. You don't like having to think. You don't like being challenged by film. In the same breath, they're like, how dare you not give his films a chance? You're not going to watch them because of one movie? And it's just like, what the fuck? Okay, decide. Should I watch them or should I not bother with them because I'm too stupid to understand them? Pick a stance, please. And I saw the exact same thing happen in my buddy Sean Chandler's comment section. I was kind of there, going to bat with him on a couple of people. And it's just like, again, coming off an assembly line, this whole fucking condescending, arrogant, pretentious crowd that thinks that because a movie is of a certain way that somehow they're like smarter or levitating above the rest of us because they like it. And it's just like, the shit ain't that deep. The same way with Midsummer. It's not that I don't get it. It's just that I don't enjoy it. It's not that fucking hard to figure out. Beau Is Afraid is not a Rubik's Cube. It's a very simple movie to figure out. It's just a lot of it. And it's very out there, very weird, and very exhausting. There's people that really like that experience. There's people that really don't. And then you get some people like me that it's like, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Time to roll the dice. Oh, shit, craps. And much more so than the Ari Aster films themselves, it's those of you guys that are a part of that crowd that make the actual discussion and the discourse surrounding his films so fucking miserable. You're the reason why a lot of us just don't want to give those movies a shot, don't even want to endure that, to the point where we walk in knowing exactly how this is going to go. Luckily, there's still a lot of you guys out there that actually have common sense that go, hey, you know, I like this movie, but I could see 100% why it doesn't work for other people. You guys, you're a godsend. And all of you that have that mindset, which was luckily the vast majority of the people that were actually in my YouTube comment section and not in Twitter, you guys are the good part of the discussion. But the bad part of it on both sides, Jesus, you got the extreme reactions on both sides to where if somebody likes the movie, you get this side of the crowd that just calls them pretentious and art snobs, and they just pretend to like anything that smells artistic. And then you get this side that sees those of us that didn't like the movie and just talks down to you as if you only watched like fucking Teletubbies or something. Like, yeah, too smart for you, buddy. Don't even bother. Oh, man. People. When are we going to learn? Nonetheless, Beau Is Afraid, a movie that has a lot of merit to it, a movie that's certainly thought-provoking on some level, but just not quite the experience that I enjoy as a movie fan. It's just not my cup of tea. Moving on to number 5 is a movie that I actually was able to squeeze out an hour and a half to go check out today, and it's because it was only an hour and a half. Can we re-normalize the 90-minute movie? It seems like we're getting away from that more times than we should. I love the fact that SISU is exactly what is advertised, and it is a very simple, straightforward 90-minute experience that delivers exactly what it advertised. Once in a while, I need that as a palate cleanser. I need a movie that you just walk in, especially after something like Beau Is Afraid. Beau Is Afraid and SISU would have been a perfect double feature. Watch Beau Is Afraid first, and then watch SISU, and then figure out why you just spent 8 hours at the movies. So SISU is essentially like, how did Sean put it? Sean's the one that enlightened me to this movie's existence in MegaCon. A Finnish John Wick with Nazis, I think is how he put it. And that's a pretty accurate description of the movie. You get a guy who is a gold miner during the mid-1940s as World War II is wrapping up and the Nazis are still occupying Finland. And so he finds a bunch of gold. And so the first half of the movie is the Nazis coming after him to get the gold, and the second half of the movie is him going after the Nazis to get the gold back. And it's just a very simple, fast-paced, 90-minute, gore-filled action movie. And if that sounds intriguing to you, if that sounds like a really good time, you're probably going to enjoy this movie. I love a good violent action movie, and so I did enjoy this. I didn't love it, though. I think that the action is pretty good, although it's mostly the first act and the third act. The second act slows down quite a bit. I liked some of the practical effects in the gore. I thought it looked pretty gnarly, and I always appreciate whenever we go back to using practical and sticking away from the CGI, because it's just that uncanny valley is always too strong for me. Where the movie disappointed me, though, is on the character department predominantly. I'm fine with the movie having a simple story, and this does, as I just described it, very simplistic. But if you have a simple story, I still want to have some of that value that I get out of a story with your characters. And the main character here is extremely simple. It has like maybe 2 lines in the entire movie, and they're all at the end. And we're only given this much information about him in passing by 2 of the Nazi characters. And it's the most cliched description of a character who is the protagonist of an action film at this point, where the bad guys pick up the phone, or they talk to somebody, and they're like, oh, that's a bad motherfucker from way back when. They know who he is. Like, we should fear him. We've seen that so many times. And that's really all you get out of his character. And so there's just not really a whole lot to really attach yourself to aside from the fact that he's not the Nazis. So you always side against the side that is not the Nazis. And they know that. And it's always fun to see the Nazis get torn apart in a lot of violent, gory ways. So on that side of things, they got it covered. But I wanted more from his character. The other side of things that was possibly even more of an issue than the light character work here is that it was way too over the top for me as far as the amount of things that the main character survives. I mean, I don't even want to describe them to you because I don't want to spoil parts of the movie, but like it's things that no human person would live through no matter what, with no even shred of logic. And the movie is very grounded. And so you can't have that same leap of logic in a movie that's very grounded and gritty. If this was a movie like, Shoot 'em Up with Clive Owen, then I wouldn't ask a whole lot of questions, but it's not. And so when you have this guy doing all these things and enduring all these things and surviving like he's a god, it takes me out of it. It took me out of it a lot. So I had a pretty good time with it. If you're a big fan of action movies, especially of the ultra-violent kind, you'll probably have a good time with this too. I don't necessarily think it's going to be this big, gigantic hit or a sleeper start to a franchise the way that John Wick was, but it's a good time for 90 minutes. Now, before I get into my top 4, I got to apologize really quickly. I was so just mentally drained and overworking myself last month that I accidentally included 2 April releases on that video, Air as well as Super Mario Brothers. So I'm going to get into them again here. If you've already heard my thoughts, no shame whatsoever in fast forwarding to the next one. Just one of my classic brain farts. But nonetheless, coming in at number 4 is going to be the Super Mario Brothers movie. And I really enjoyed this one. I had a good time with this with my kids. I look forward to watching it again with them when it comes to home video. It delivered a lot of what I would want from a Mario film. It was, I liked the animation. I liked a lot of the humor in it. I think that the way that they covered so many different worlds and spectrums of Mario games, like Mario Party, Mario Kart, and some of the different eras of Mario with not only the humor, but the visuals and the costumes and the things that are in the Mario world. I just had a really good time with it as somebody that's been playing different Mario games ever since I was, 3, 4 years old. And my kids that are obviously younger, haven't experienced as much of Mario as I have, had a really good time with it too. All 3 of them really enjoyed it. I did have a very mixed experience in regards to the voice acting here. I think some people did pretty good, like Charlie Day and especially Jack Black were big standouts to me. I thought Chris Pratt did fine. He did better than I think a lot of people were giving him credit for, and certainly a lot more than people expected him to do, but he did fine. I don't think he was the best version of Mario we could have ever gotten, but he did fine. Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong was one that I didn't like whatsoever, and I don't fault Seth Rogen for that. I mean, he's very upfront and honest from what I can tell about when people go to hire him, and he goes, hey, I don't do voices, so Donkey Kong's going to sound like Seth Rogen. If that's what you want, I'll take your money. And that's the studio. If you have an issue with that, that is the studio problem, not a Seth Rogen problem. But I didn't like his version of Donkey Kong all that much. It was fine. It's charming hearing the Seth Rogen laugh come out of Donkey Kong, but there's no actual voice acting there. It's just Seth Rogen reading lines in front of Donkey Kong character. Beyond that, there's also a lot of music in the movie that I felt was really ill-placed, and it's like a collection of a bunch of songs that I wish I'd never heard again for the rest of my life. Just really overplayed stuff from the 80s and 90s. And, it's not a movie that's necessarily has like this real deep storyline or has some themes that are going to hit you like a really good Pixar film or something that as an adult, you're going to have like something to really latch onto. It's a very kid-centric movie, but I had a good time with it, seeing it with my kids. That's what the movie's intended for. So they did their job. I would recommend seeing it. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Evil Dead Rise. And this was the big release of April that I was really looking forward to. I'm a fan of the Evil Dead films. I'm a casual fan. I'm not like really crazy about them. And it was, later in life, kind of like with Scream, that I really started to get really into those movies. They haven't been there as like this lifelong love, the way that Chucky and Freddy and some other franchises have been. But Scream as well as Evil Dead, I would say, are the 2 most consistent franchises as far as delivering what you expect and delivering a certain level of quality. And Evil Dead Rise continues that trend for the Evil Dead films. This is kind of a standalone movie. It's, one of the 3 Necronomicons that we saw in Army of Darkness have wound up in the hands of this family in this high-rise apartment in the city. And Evil Dead shit happens, but The change of setting was really interesting. The fact that it's focusing on a family with some young children is very different, because usually it's all teenagers and adults. And if you know the type of nasty shit that happens to people in an Evil Dead film, there's high stakes when you have children in the warpath of that. I thought that the central performance by the woman playing the mother, the main Deadite, was awesome, and she's one of the more memorable Deadites of this entire franchise. And I love the fact that this was true to Evil Dead and being just hyper violent, ultra gory. Not nearly as violent or as gory as the 2013 movie, but still, for the spectrum of modern horror, I would say it's a pretty gory movie. So I enjoyed all of that. Where I really felt like there was something missing from this film is that because it focused on a family and young kids, I was really missing more of character work here, which is something that, they've never really focused on much in the Evil Dead films. It's not really been character-driven movies. We all love Ash, but even Ash is a very simple character. But because of that change of dynamic, having it focus on a family and kids and people that love each other and not just friends, I was missing that. I felt like that really helped, that really hurt me from liking these characters and worrying and caring about these characters so much. And that also, when you have something that's such a tense experience and these kids are in danger, you really want to have something else there to care about them for, other than the fact that they're young and small. And so the movie didn't try to do that, and I felt like they should have. The other side of it, which I didn't get into so much in my review, I did watch this a second time, and to be honest with you, I didn't like it quite as much on my second watch. I still very much liked it and still very much would give it a positive review, but I gave it 4 out of 5 when I first watched it. I would probably knock that down to 3.75 out of 5. Not that that fucking matters, 0.25, but I don't know. I feel more comfortable with that number. And something that I noticed about it on second watch is that, kind of going along with the fact that they didn't attempt to do something different as far as really going into character work here, the movie really just kind of sticks to tried and true Evil Dead stuff. And so that's going to be something that I'm a little mixed on, because on one hand, I love the fact that I know what I'm getting with this movie and they deliver what I expect. And at the same time, I kind of want some unexpected. We've had 5 Evil Dead films at this point, and they all kind of deliver some of the same things. And I wish this movie maybe had taken a few more risks and did something a bit more different aside from just the setting change. And, I think that Evil Dead, being the success of this movie, I'm sure they're going to make another one very quickly. I think Evil Dead as a franchise is at a point where it's time to do something different. It's time to take some risks. It's time to bring something new and fresh and unique to Evil Dead beyond just a setting change. So again, really like this movie, really positive, recommendation for me, especially if you're an Evil Dead fan. But for all of the massive praise that I saw leading up to it, as if this movie was going to change your life if you're an Evil Dead fan, gotta love those early reaction hyperboles. The movie could have given me a bit more. It wasn't quite that religious of an experience for me. Coming in at number 2 is going to be Renfield, and I just had a blast with this thing. This, much like Evil Dead, advertised something and delivered exactly what it advertises. And I was all for just checking out the Nicolas Cage Dracula movie, and that's all I really needed to know about it to get my interest and to have my ticket paid. And I had so much fun with a lot of the things that they went for here. I think Nicholas Hoult is really good as the lead here, Renfield. Of course, I walked in wanting Nick Cage Dracula, and the Nick Cage Dracula that I got is just something that I never knew I needed in my life, but I'm glad that I have it now. Really good sense of humor in the movie, much like with Evil Dead, hyper violent to a comedic degree, and I really enjoyed that. Really, the only side of the movie I didn't like so much was the Awkwafina mob family stuff, and it's because I've never really cared much for Awkwafina as an actress. Her sense of humor doesn't necessarily work for me, and I don't necessarily think that she's just the best actress in general. No hate for her, but just her work so far hasn't done much for me. And the villains, as far as the non-Dracula characters, the mob family, didn't do anything for me either. So every time the movie diverted to their story, I kind of lost interest a bit. But luckily, the majority of it is Renfield and Dracula. And another movie, too, that I didn't talk about this in my review, but for so many movies nowadays that are accused of putting message first, and there's certainly some that deserve that accusation. We talked about one earlier. This is a movie that really cleverly winds in some commentary on toxic relationships and gaining the strength to get out of them and all of those types of things, but putting it into the story in a way where it feels natural and it doesn't feel like it's message first, story second. It feels like they're intertwined as one. And so I appreciated that about it too. So if Nicolas Cage as Dracula doesn't get you into this movie, hopefully my recommendation will, because I had a really good time with this one. But coming in at number 1 is going to be Ben Affleck's Air, and I won't talk about this one too much because I talked about it last month like a bonehead. I love Ben Affleck as a filmmaker. The only thing that I did not like about his time as Batman is that it took him away from giving us more movies. And this is a really nice return to form for him, a really nice story that I didn't know so much about, so I was really personally interested in it. For those that don't know, I do not like sports whatsoever, but I love a good sports movie because I love stories, and there's some really good stories to be told throughout sports history. And telling the story of Nike as an underdog company, which is strange to think of nowadays because all my life Nike's been number one. Telling it as Michael Jordan being an underdog, which same thing, see Nike, always been number one the entire time that I've been alive. Telling a traditional underdog story, which we've seen a dime a dozen of those in sports films in a very non-traditional way, where it's the story of a company and trying to line up their ideologies and their goals with somebody that is this rising, quite literal star in basketball, and come out with this shoe line that's going to change not only shoes, but sports contracts forever. On paper, those are things that could not interest me less. And the way that they present the story and those elements in this movie had my attention the entire time. Great cast all the way around. Really funny movie. The funniest movie that I've seen in 2013. Jesus, 2023. See, this brain gets mushed sometimes. You talk about movies enough and just words don't make sense anymore. Funniest movie of 2023 so far. And so if you're somebody that is a sports fan, it's a must-see. But even if you're somebody that's not so much a sports fan, if just the elements that I've told you about interest you, it's one of the best movies that I've seen of the year so far. And unless we just have an extremely kick-ass year in store for us for the rest of 2023, which I really hope we do, this is likely to be in my best of the year list. So Air is coming in at number 1. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for the playlist of all of my 2023 new release reviews. And I'm also going to put my March ranking up here. You'll hear some similar thoughts on 2 movies, but check that one out. And like, share, hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.